Hey, it's Curly, and while I don't usually go over tournament results in this channel, we had an insanely massive weekend that just passed because we not only had our World BCS Finals, we also had the Japan's Deluxe Finals, and in addition, on top of all of that, we had the first ever Vanguard World Invitational Tournament. So we'll jump into all of that today, starting with the format that I know probably the least about, V Premium. Of course, any of the pie charts that I have here today are provided by VGParadox. I'll have all his links in the description down below. I won't spend too much time on V Premium because I'm not very, well versed in the format. I've actually started playing it myself because it's a format that I wanted to try out for a very long time, but of course it's been that format that's been rumored to shut down some time or another. So this possibly is the final Worlds for V Premium, but of course we've been saying that I feel like for a good while. In the top 8, we have ourselves 4 Gold Paladin, 2 Grand Blue, 1 Great Nature, and 1 Luard, or Shadow Paladin. Which sounds about right from everything that I've heard about everyone talking about the format, and what my loose understanding of the format is that these are essentially the top decks, with the one being missing being Bermuda Triangle, and then also Aqua Force not showing in any way, shape, or form. I don't know if Aqua Force was brought at all. I don't have the numbers of exactly what was brought. I only know that Bermuda Triangle did show up for V Premium, but it did not make it into top 8. I tried my best to watch as much of the footage as I can, but unfortunately, because I am a filthy American and this took place in Japan, there's a 12 or 13 hour time difference. So this was like starting at midnight my time and didn't end until I want to say like 7 or 6 or something in the morning, maybe way sooner than that. So it was really hard for me to watch most of this, especially because they were all happening concurrently at the same time, so I had to keep flipping between Twitch channels to view this. On top of that, this was streamed from Bushiroad's official Twitch channels, which, if you don't know, they always turn off their VODs, so you can never watch these streams after it's done. You can watch it after they take a look at it and clean it up and then post it, but sometimes they either don't do that or do that several months later. So suffice to say, I can't go back and take a look at the footage, but I do know I saw some Bermuda Triangle that just didn't convert into top 8. But the massive showing of Gold Paladin here, especially in top 4, makes a lot of sense to me because I've been talking about, V Premium briefly, and Gold Paladin is a really strong deck, and I feel like it's been a very strong deck for a very long time, where as soon as I learned about V Premium, Gold Paladin was the best deck, and then after that, it got hit, then Sea Maidens became a thing for a very long time, and then they got hit, and then now Gold Paladins are back, so time really is a flat circle. But in our top 4 here, we of course have the top 4 for the V Premium final, maybe final. So we have ourselves Henry here in 4th with Grand Blue. Congratulations. We have ourselves Nick in 3rd with Gold Paladin. Congratulations. We have ourselves the controversial Man Long in 2nd with Luard. And then finally we have our V Premium champion for the World's BCS 2023 season in Rickson Cho. I'm sorry if I pronounced anyone's names wrong, but congratulations to all of you. We can jump over really quickly and take a look at the winning list since we do have them here. We'll start with the 4th place Grand Blue list, which essentially looks exactly what you would expect, I believe. I am somewhat versed in Grand Blue, but not to the massive extent. I'm familiar with some of these cards just because you play them in Premium, which I've played more of, but I haven't exclusively played them in V Premium. That being said, this looks pretty much par for the course, as far as I can tell when it comes to Grand Blue. Next up, we have our first Gold Paladin list here, which looks very similar to the first place one, but they have some very specific key differences here. So this one is a more sort of aggressive list, to my understanding, that focuses more on like riding into Ezel and having that be more persistent because of the fact that we see here we don't have any of the grade 3 heal triggers. Instead we have the grade 0 heal triggers. Those heal triggers, the grade 3 ones, only work if you're grade 2 or less, so it would make sense on a deck that is jumping forward to grade 3 as quickly as possible that you don't need those. So that's kind of interesting here, but the main key winners for, Grand Blue and for Gold Paladin is, of course, this promo card. This one specifically for Gold Paladin, and then the Riveting France for Grand Blue, which is the ride fixer cards that we've gotten throughout the year of 2023, trickled out every single month. Every clan will get 2 of these at your tournament locals, and this one is really good. This one is extremely good. I'm also shocked at how cheap this card was. It might have changed by now, but this card is also really cheap because they are just widely distributed, which I think is a very smart way to do this, because at least in my area, these are just entrance promos. You just get this from playing, even if you're not playing V Premium, right? They just give you these, which is really good, rather than you having to get a pack and then play a gacha to try and get the card. So this card is extremely good for Gold. Paladin is pivotal to their game plan now. Next up, we have ourselves Luard here, who I really do not know anything about, but this is the Luard list. Finally, here we have the Gold Paladin list that won here from Rixon. So the thing to note here, of course, there is here the grade 3 heal triggers, and we don't see the Raven-haired Ezel either. So kind of interesting that they are 2 very similar builds, extremely similar, but a few cards definitely make the deck play a little bit differently, and whether or not this is the better version, I don't know. But hey, once again, congratulations to everyone that competed for B Premium, and then congratulations to the winners. Next up, we've got ourselves the top 8 for Premium here, which somewhat looks like what you would expect. Premium is a somewhat diverse format right now. So we got ourselves 2 Neonectar, 2 Genesis of 2 different completely main Vanguards here. One with Minerva, and one with Fenrir. Then we got ourselves Nupatama, a Bermuda Triangle Narukami, and a Nova Grappler. So pretty diverse top 8, which is, good to see. And for top 4, here are your winners for the Premium BCS 2023 World Final. We got ourselves Stephen Lee with Nova Grappler in 4th. Congratulations. We got ourselves Gumi Bars with Neonectar using Katrina in 3rd. Congratulations. We have John with Genesis, specifically built around Minerva, in 2nd place. Congrats. And finally, we have our winner for the Premium World in Parody, Paro DIY, here with Genesis, but with Fenrir. Congratulations to everyone. So let's go ahead and take a look at the 4th place Nova Grappler list here, which is pretty much par for the course. Nova Grappler, since the History Collection has been doing extremely well for itself, because it can, play the original Extreme Battler Victor and go into the new upgraded Vic 10 to easily get the 2 Excel markers, which helps out the game plan for the deck substantially. And since then, this deck has actually seen quite a lot of results. I think it won a tournament in Japan, 1st place for Premium, the one rare event that they had for Premium, and I believe they also had a lot of good showings throughout most of the BCSs, so I'm not shocked to see this deck here. Most of these make a lot of sense. For example, there's the new promo card, which, is very similar to the ones that we went over in the V Premium side. This is the Nova Grappler version. They all share the same effect, where if you're in your hand, you're on grade 1 or less, you can discard it, look at the top 5, add a grade 2 or less card from among them to your hand, so it helps you fix your ride either on turn 1 or turn 2, because you can search out either 1 or 2 that you can ride into. But they also have their own clan-specific effect on top of that, most of which are really good. The other promo, of course, we see here is the Sasanda, which has been an absolute force in this deck. And, everything else is relatively par for the course. We've seen a lot of this heal trigger here, this Blau heal trigger here, just because it allows you to countercharge for the deck. I've been seeing a lot of this instead of just playing 4 copies of, the grade 3 heal trigger. We've also seen the Roll Rock here, which is pretty useful because this is essentially a PG if you're going 2nd, which is really nice, so you don't get blown out as badly when your opponent can now stride on their 1st grade 3 turn. So the only card of this that I'm not super familiar with, well, I am familiar, but hadn't considered playing this is the Ultimate Riser Dual Flare here, which is a card that I haven't seen on a lot of these lists, at least recently, but it is kind of interesting. So it just says that at the end of the battle, as it attacks, you put into the soul, choose a Vanguard, it gets 5k and you countercharge. And then also, if you have no standing front row guards, this gets 3k for each of your opponent's Vanguard's grade. Which, you know, if they're on a grade 3, this is a plus 9k, pretty decent. So this is a decent little attacker here, but also gives you some extra counter charge, which is pretty sick. Next up here, we have ourselves the Neo Nectar list. I'm very happy to see here this Enlarge here, because I feel like coming out of set 13, not a lot of people put a lot of value in this card. This card was very cheap to get, and I was just like, what the hell is wrong with you? This card is insane in like every format. This will be really good in Standard once we get our Stride deck set for Starkea. This sounds really good for all of Zoo, which is 5 different nations, so I don't understand why this wasn't like instantly bought out. Not that I'm entirely complaining, but I'm glad to see it here played. We have ourselves, of course, the famous Hanali. We got 4 copies of that fella just out there. And of course, we got the recently unrestricted Katrina here. I believe this is the card that recently just got unbanned. I believe it was over the fall of that sort. And of course, here we have ourselves, again, the promo card, the Ride Fixer here, 4 copies of that as well. Very good card for basically every single deck. Next up here, we've got ourselves one of the first Genesis lists. This one is specifically Regalias, focusing on Minerva. The lists aren't entirely too different, I think, but I'm not super well versed in Genesis. I've played Genesis in like Vanguard 0, and I don't think it is much in the same, because this Minerva was not very good in Vanguard 0 from what I recall, and it was released towards the end of the game's life cycle. But we can see, of course, here the During, which is a really interesting card, very strong card in all of Keter for premium, because of the fact that its effect is only working if your Vanguard has 1 clan, which for all of premium, you will of course only have 1 clan. So it's a very strong card. But then finally we have ourselves here the first place list, which plays a lot of interesting cards here, a lot of interesting cards that don't see a lot of play in Standard specifically, such as here the Rush Dragon, who says if this is placed from hand, you Soul Blast 1, choose a grade 2 or greater from your drop, put it on top of your deck. Hasn't seen a lot of use in Standard, but of course, a lot of these cards can see a whole new breath of life over in Premium. Of course, have the Durin here again, as well as the Gold Gowon, which I think is a really interesting card that I think would be really good to play in some of the upcoming decks in Standard, to be honest, such as the Raziel and the Quick Start boss, because of the fact that it says, whenever this is placed, you Soul Blast 1, and you can call a grade 1 from your hand to rear. And the unit you call out get 5k. So this just lets you just call out, you call him out, you can easily just call out something else. It has to be a grade 1, which kind of sucks, but a lot of the grade 1s in both those decks I mentioned can actually swing in for 13k. So that wouldn't be too bad. I managed to catch a game of this against Grand Blue, and he actually ended up winning by deck out, because they did something that forced the opponent to, like, I think overcall one of their cards and then like mill or something like that. I'm not too sure, but that was really fun to see. In any case, congratulations to everyone for the Premium World Finals. Finally, we can talk about the format that I actually know a lot about. We got ourselves Standard here. This is the top 8. We got ourselves 3 of the B heroes, 1 Leonorn, 1 Youthberg, 1 Dragjeweled, 1 Diva, 1 Shojodoji. Somewhat expected for the most part. Probably expected a lot more Leonorns, because I remember hearing on the stream that Leonorn was the most represented deck that all the players brought, but only one of them managed to convert into top 8. The most shocking of this was actually the heroes that showed up. There's a total of 3 of them that made it all the way to top 8. This might be shocking for some, not shocking for me, obviously, as I play the deck, so I'm very familiar with the deck. The deck is, in my opinion, still extremely good, extremely underrated. It's been extremely good since it first came out in set 6. A lot of people don't recognize that because of the fact that there were a lot of much better options at the time, but Heroes, when it was actually able to do its thing, was an extremely good deck. The main thing holding it back is that it was never able to actually consistently do its thing, and especially wasn't able to do its thing until turn 4 there. However, over the course of many sets, we've gotten enough promos and enough support cards to actually make this an amazing deck that can swing with a crit, can multi-attack more than 4 or 5 times per turn, by the way, has the ability to just completely thin out the deck entirely to just have all triggers left, and now it has the ability to be extremely consistent thanks to the Amas, and as well as the Bolt Furanis that you can play in the deck. So Heroes is an extremely good deck. The only real thing that is holding the deck back, in my opinion, is that it doesn't plus as good, which once it does that, I think it might literally be the best deck in Standard. Other than that, we have sort of the usual suspects here. We've got the big 3, more or less, in Leonor, Youthberg, and Drag Jeweled here. Very strong contenders. The Jivas, there is, I think, more than one Jiva. Had a pretty strong showing here. It's a deck that, you know, in terms of power level, is actually pretty strong, but a lot of people don't really look at it that way just because of its long history of just being a real weird convoluted mess. And of course, the elephant in the room here is the Shojodoji, which was actually the winner of the entire thing, much like it was the winner in Japan for the same exact format. So in 4th place, we've got Biz with Drag Jeweled. Congratulations. We've got Rojoman here with Jiva. Congrats. Then we've got Sora Hart in 2nd place with Leonor. Congrats. And finally, our champion is Dorian with the Shojodoji. Congratulations to everyone. So going into the deck list here, I will preface this that this is a tournament where you can use 50 cards in the main deck, and also the new rule where if you win the dice roll or you win whatever it is that you're using to decide who goes first or second, instead of that winner automatically going first, instead now you choose whether or not you want to go first or second. So this played a bit of a role, I think, in a lot of the choices and a lot of decks that were being played. There was some controversy in one of the hero lists actually playing a Messiah G-Zone, which is illegal. You actually can't play a G-Zone unless you have specifically, I think, the grade 1 and grade 1 and grade 0 of your ride deck in your ride deck. And also, if your opponent asks you, hey, is that a G deck? You have to answer yes or no, and, you know, with actual facts. You can't just lie about that. So you can't just have conveniently 8 tokens stacked next to your ride deck and just pretend it's your G deck, because that is illegal. I don't know what the situation is here, how Bushiroad is going to handle that, what's going to happen with that, but the thought process behind this being, if you have a G deck, you, the player with the G deck, want to go second. So the thought here is that it was maliciously done so that your opponent will think you have a G deck. If they win the die roll, they'll see the G deck and be like, no, you're going first, not me, so that you can't stride right away. But then it turns out they don't even have the G deck, so they get to go first, which was their intended outcome. But enough about that. Let's go ahead and take a look at this Drag Jeweled list, which is essentially par for the course for Drag Jeweled here. One of the interesting things here to note is that we're seeing the stand heal triggers being played, which is the heal trigger that works the most right now in this specific format. I don't know if the going second heal triggers will see a lot more play when Shiranui and Luar drop, since you can now choose to go first or second. But this one just says here it's 10k base, but it gets 15k if you guard and that unit has stood or attacked more than once this turn, because it works against a lot of the decks in the format, specifically the Leonor, which is running rampant in this format. Other than that, the deck is pretty standard. They don't play any copies of that dumb grade 3 that all the Jack Jeweled players like to play that I just don't like, because the maid here does everything way better than that grade 3 ever could. Instead here, we actually have ourselves the Causality Dragon here, which is a pretty interesting card from Festival Collection. It says you put something else in the same column to Soul. It gets, I think, 5k, and then you retire one of your opponent's rear guards. But if you have an overtrigger in your drop, you can remove it, and your opponent must guard, or they can't guard with grade 1 or greater cards. which is, you know, pretty nifty to have that in your back pocket. And it's nice to just have another extra grade 3 to make sure you hit all the requirements for Dragon Jewel in order to Soul Blast different grades. Dragon Jewel is a really strong deck. However, it is a deck that, of course, is a turn 4 deck and struggles with a lot of the more aggressive decks in the format, because even though it has a lot of cards that lets it draw and somewhat stabilize, it's still kind of weak in the early game. Even though, again, it has like the Zazangan and all that stuff, it just has a couple of weaknesses that players can exploit, especially given the current format. Next up, we have ourselves Jiva, which of course was the bit of a shock that it actually managed to not only show up but be in 3rd place here. This deck is, you know, extremely strong thanks to this, you know, custom card here in the Strav Arena that gives your Vanguard plus 10k and an additional drive, and it gives itself 10k, and it can stand your entire board if you choose it for your Jiva's skill. So this deck does just about almost everything, right? You have guard restricts, you have countercharge and draw, you have retire and power, you have the ability to just search out your pieces from the deck, you have the ability to, again, apply more guard restricts, you can have resist on your units, you can have draw power, you can have consistency, getting more of your specific cards, you can have a random card that I think was just played for the sake of having different prayer names. And you know, all this stuff really gels together because the deck just has a lot of tools that I can play with, but it just swings like hell, and it just is really strong. It was always really strong, it was just always very inconsistent, and I think mainly due to in part of this fella right here, the deck is extremely consistent now and able to pull off what it needs to. I think another thing to know is that I feel like a lot of people have this sort of like Magnolia Mask syndrome with this deck, where they think like, oh, you have to get 5 different original draws on this card in order for this deck to work. Well, you don't. You only need that to retire your opponent's board and their markers. You can perfectly just do 2 different Prayer Dragons and a Trickstar, and you got yourself a good deck, baby. So, you know, it's like Magnolia Mask. You don't need to get 5 markers. Next up here, we've got Leonorn. I was going to say Lillian. We got Leonorn here. This is actually the hybrid version that has the new Vivance plus the Mask version here, also known as like the Gene Norn list. I believe it has maybe some other names. The main mythology behind this being that you can basically be a very, very good, well-rounded deck, because you have the tokens in the early game here for the Aurora and the Rosarium Fairy, plus the Luster Impart Dragon, which is another promo for the deck, that allows you to very easily have a very strong turn 1 and turn 2, able to play out your tokens, not commit too many cards from hand, in order to pressure down your opponent. Then, if you're going second, you can then mask with the Leonorn Mask, because the Vivance is locked to turn 4. So you can instead do this to then restand and have all the Persona Ride pressure thanks to the mask. And then you can of course finish off your opponent with the Vivance, who can stand the whole, boost with the whole board and get an extra Vanguard swing and extra rearguard swings and all of that jazz. As well as use the consistency of stuff like the Delph Elwolf to get out cards from your deck in combination with, you know, the Misty Habitat to just stand out your deck as well and get all the pieces that you need. So it's a very good, well-rounded, solid deck. I very much like how the deck plays. Of course, does have similar weaknesses to Dragon Jewel, ironically, where, of course, if it doesn't see his pieces, it's kind of in a bad spot, but it doesn't really have that much of an issue with that. It has an issue with just being able to guard, ironically. So this is a lot more aggressive deck, in my opinion. It can amass a bit of a hand, but I don't think it can do it as consistently, and most of these things are just focused on either being aggressive or consistently getting your pieces. So there's nothing here that really pluses you or really protects you too easily, aside from maybe this one cat. And that's kind of about it. Finally, we have ourselves the first place here with the Shojodoji. The shock of all shocks for the second time. People do not want to put any respect on this deck. Shojodoji is an insanely good deck that I thought people would probably pick up on the fact that, you know, the grade 2 Shojodoji has been doing amazing in Shiranui because of the fact that it can very easily just call out a card from the top of your deck. And that is extremely strong because you can very easily fill up your deck with stealth cards, call out, let's say, the Unprecedented, draw a card, have a freaking 13k on your opponent's turn to just swing in with and get some really nice pressure early on. and then later on have pretty solid numbers when it comes to this deck that can actually get 5 attacks. I feel like, again, it's sort of like the Magnolia Mask Syndrome, where a lot of people focus on this first part of Shojodoji's skill that says you bind 2 cards with self. You bind 2 cards from your soul into the bind zone, and then you bind 2 of your opponent's rears, and they focus on that part. And I think they think that that's what this deck does, where that's kind of like the part that no one really cares about. That's the least important part of Shojodoji. Like, it's kind of nice, but those cards at the end of the turn just go back to your opponent's hand. So people, I think, instantly write off the deck because of that. That doesn't matter. What matters is the part that you can counterblast 1, put 2 rear guards into soul, to then call out something from your bind zone to get a 4th attack. This can also get power. This works really well with all these other cards. Again, like the Unprecedented, that says if 2 cards went into your soul this turn, this gets another 10k. And if you have a Shojodoji, when this displays your soul blast 1, draw a card. So that's really good. Then, of course, we have stuff like the Izao, which is a pretty decent card because you can counterblast 1 like a top 5 at a stealth card, which will become extremely good once Shiranui comes out, because you can add your PGs. You have stealth PGs now, but these are the bad PGs that always cost you to discard. But come Shiranui, he actually gives Shojodoji something instead of stealing everything from Shojodoji, because you get the new stealth PGs that are 6k, and if you have no cards in hand, you can still guard with them. So you can very easily search out your PGs, as well as any of your other pieces. You can use, the Forktail here to thin out your deck for stealth pieces, which your entire deck is stealth. So you can just get rid of all your units, compress your deck for 1, but also get the soul that you need so that you can then put these cards in the bind zone and then attack with them. And then use stuff like the promo here to actually get a 5th attack, because this says whenever something is put into soul, you can counterblast 1, call this from bind zone. So this gives you the 5th attack, because you can call out, you can swing with Shojodoji, put stuff into soul, call something, and then this fella sees you called something and puts stuff into soul, or more specifically puts stuff into soul, then he calls himself out. The problem with this deck that it was very counterblast heavy and it had no way to fix this. Boom! Bushiroad was like, alright, bet, here's a promo that actually countercharges for you. And on top of that, you can actually use this to guard from your bind zone. It's also a grade 1, which is really smart on Bushi's part. So this deck can do just about everything with just the cards that it has, but it also is extremely good in the early game as well, because it's just very easily able to just rush down your opponent and close out the game when it's pretty sizable numbers. This is a pretty interesting inclusion, the Goon, the Goonjuku here, which I've seen a bit in some of the other lists, especially in like some Shiranui lists, surprisingly. But this is pretty interesting, because this says, 1, if this is placed by an ability, if your opponent has 2 or less rear guards, this gets 10k. So this is active more often than not, especially because you can just bind 2 of your opponent's rear guards with Shojodoji, so this can get 10k. Then if you play this with Shojodoji, it gets another 10k on top of that. But also, when this hits, you can actually retire and draw a card, which is a nice little piece of resource gain there. But it can also retire itself, and then if you have a spot for this, maybe, kind of jazz. So this is a really good deck overall. This is a sort of more, I feel like, simple version of the build, not to, take anything away from anyone that helped build this or that used this or anything in that sort, but it's kind of just 4 of every card with stealth in the name. Not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but just saying that's how simple the deck is, or that's how good the deck is, that you can just build it super simply, just throw everything in it, and it'll go and do its thing. So really quickly, let's just take a look at the winners from the Deluxe. So Japan, for whatever reason, has Bushiroad, which hosts the World's Finals, has tournaments around the world to have players come in to see who's, I guess, the best in the world. We'll get back into that. And then brings them all into Japan to have a tournament to be crowned the winner for each format. But then they also decided to, separately from among that, have a tournament for only Japan to compete in. It might be open to like maybe people in that area or whatever the case may be, but specifically it's for Japan. So we have ourselves a world champion, and then we have ourselves a Japan champion, which I think is really stupid, especially considering that these happened at the same time, literally. Literally at the same event, possibly, but it was literally at the same time, probably even the same venue. I think that's kind of silly. I was really hoping that we would finally get a combined Worlds between Japan and the rest of the world, especially considering that they've had this gap in releases, which would have made it really easily. You could have just very easily said, okay, no Shiranui for no deck sets for Japan, no quick start decks, and that's it, right? Because they haven't released any major product. Okay, fine. I guess there's also none of the triple rare booster, but there's only 2 decks that really come out of that. I don't think that would have been a huge ask. I think Japanese player probably wouldn't minded not having to deal with Shiranui and Lured constantly because, you know, in first place here we got ourselves Shiranui by Dark J. We got ourselves here Luard by, when I looked up the translation for this, his name just said, the translation just said his name was Chad. And then, of course, Shiranui again here for Mingju Hong here. Sorry if I said your name wrong. Congratulations to them. No blight against them or anything like that. The only thing that bothered me is that the Japanese Cardfight Vanguard account tweeted out, this might just be the translation, but here at the end it says, the player who took the title of World's Strongest, the world, the whole world, the entirety of the world, all 7, 8, 9 billion, 11 billion of the world was decided on a tournament where only Japanese players played? I don't know about that. I really hope that in the future Japan gets included into the world circuit and we have a lot more of a, you know, cohesiveness, and it's a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Together? You know, all the formats are together. For example, like the Vanguard World Invitational Tournament that was hosted by Chris Different Fight over in Japan. Essentially, how this went down is that there were 4 different teams from 4 different areas in the world. We had 4 players from Japan, 4 players from the AO region, I believe that's like Asia and Oceanica. We had 4 players from the North American region, and then finally 4 players from the European region, EU. Both with 2 players playing premium, 2 players playing standard, and they just had a tournament among them. Of course, this was an invitational tournament, so not just anyone can join, but it was hosted by Different Fight, which is amazing. One of the main reasons that it was amazing is the fact that we got to see Japanese players play against players from around the world. They got to play against, you know, American players. I didn't get to see this as well either, because you can see here this is 12:30 Japan time. This was like midnight my time again, and I had already stayed up late the night before. But thankfully this isn't on a Bushiroad official channel, so they didn't take down the VOD. This is actually on Different Fights, both his YouTube channel and his Twitch channel, so you can go ahead and check that out. The Twitch version has the commentary in English. The YouTube version has the commentary in Japanese. I believe both of those VODs are still there. It was really nice also because Bushiroad, I guess, kind of blessed this in a sense, because they also mentioned it on their, you know, weekly streams, and the tournament was great. It was great to see all of these players and everyone come together for this event. Really hoping that it becomes a thing that happens more regularly. I know it's super easy for me to say that, like, oh yeah, just keep doing it. It was great. Not giving any credit to all the work and all the planning and scheduling that was involved in this, but I just want to see more of this, where it just kind of combines the player base, because I feel like I've made this point a lot, where the player base is constantly scattered all over the place. We're already split into 3 different camps because of the formats that we play, and there's already a lot of like, I don't want to say discourse, but like, I don't feel like all the formats are viewed equally by each of their players. Like, I don't think it's the kind of thing like, oh yeah, they play this format, good for them. They play this format, good for them. It's not really seen as that. And I think that's kind of an issue, that we're already segregated that way, but then we're also segregated in terms of like what country we're in, that where we can play Vanguard, where everything is somewhat isolated. The world minus Japan is kind of a little bit more put together. I keep banging into my mic all stream or all video. I'm sorry about that. I just want to talk with my hands. But there are of course a lot of parts of the world that just aren't part of this as well, so I just want to see more things like this that sort of see a more melding of the entirety of Cardfight into a more cohesive community. Actually forgot to mention who actually won the whole tournament. So we ended up having North America in 4th place. I blame the Canadians. We had Japan in 3rd place. We had the final where it was AO versus EU, and EU ended up winning the whole thing. That'll do it for the results from this super mega packed weekend in Japan. Thank you to everyone that helped organize all these tournaments and everyone that competed. I hope you guys had a great time. But till next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Play Vanguard and have yourselves a damn good one.